Hey, good afternoon, beautiful people. I'm Heather Gray with Discovering Health, and thank you for joining me on this little mini course. I want to give you a beginning starting of somatic experiencing work, why it's important. I want to give you some foundations on health and wellness and why it's important. You know, sadly, too much these days. We go into the doctor. We tell them something's wrong with us. They do some lab work. They say, your lab work looks fine, but you feel anything but fine, right? So that's what a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner such as myself really dives deep into, is finding the root causes of what's going on. I work a lot with folks who have autoimmune issues, chronic depression, anxiety, chronic pain. I'm finding almost that like 80% of the stuff that people are dealing with right now are actually lifestyle related. Like almost yeah, exactly. Like 80-90%, especially when it comes to autoimmune, right? So isn't that kind of mind blowing, thinking that just a few little tweaks here and there, right, in our day-to-day life can result in huge drastic changes for the rest of your life. I got into this line of work back in 2013 when I graduated FDN. I tell the story that I was basically born constipated. I remember my little feet falling asleep on the potty when I was like 3-4 years old because sitting there for too long, trying to make a bowel movement. I remember drinking the disgusting thick oils that the doctors, gave my mom to soften my stool, So for me, it started at a very early age. Like why was nobody looking into why this kiddo is so constipated? Instead, they were just throwing Band-Aids on symptoms, right? Which has been kind of like the story of my whole life, and probably a lot, like to do with yours as well. So then fast forward quite a few years, and I was bit by a tick when I was 13. I did not develop a bullseye rash. Only like 25% of people who have Lyme disease actually develop a bullseye rash. So I didn't show any outward symptoms till about 2 years later when I tried to commit suicide for the first time and ended up in the psych ward for a couple of weeks. So again, now here's this 13-year-old kid leaving the psych ward. I've got my handful of prescription drugs, pat on the head, and out I go. Not once was anybody sitting there asking, why is this kid wanting to off herself? So as I go deeper into my story, I'm finding out there's a huge trauma component to chronic health issues. What do I mean by trauma? Like big T trauma, like early childhood trauma, death, at war trauma, or, is it little t trauma? Is it like a chronic disease in the brain like I had with Lyme disease? Is it constant chemical reactions, toxicity, right? Like I was also a hairstylist for 15 years and I was around those toxic chemicals all the time. Heavy metal toxicity, parasites, bacteria, and yeast. So there are so many things that actually create trauma than what we come to like understand what trauma is. And sometimes, like in the case with me, I didn't remember a lot of my childhood. And I actually didn't think that there was any trauma there. But that usually when you can't remember your childhood, that's a pretty good signal. There was some trauma there. Our brains and our nervous systems are wonderful at trying to adapt to keep us safe, right? So, I was brought up by alcoholic, drug addicts. They were young enablers. Of course, there was trauma there. The funny, sad part is now that I've dug a little deeper into my health history, memories are coming up. Yay. But I think more than anything, because I was gaslighted a lot growing up, it's been nice putting to bed kind of what I thought went down but never had confirmation, never had validation, and was never seen when I was growing up. So that part's been beautiful, but I digress. So trauma, right? There's a biology of trauma. What do I mean by that? So it's like the chicken or the egg. There's actual genetic components sometimes to your biology that actually leaves you predispositioned to be affected by stress more than somebody else. What? Have you ever had that friend, that family member, and something little kind of shakes them up and you go, dude, why are you acting like that? Like it wasn't that big of a deal. It might be because they have some of this biological effects of trauma, like in their nervous system. So throughout this program, I'm going to teach you a couple exercises to help you get stored trauma out of your nervous system. So the beautiful thing is unlike therapy, we don't have to go back and relive it. We don't have to tell the story and constantly relive it. We can do these little exercises that just help this stuff move out of our nervous system, get us out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. And that's also heal, by the way. So I found in my story that I would focus on the physical, would not touch the mental, emotional, would not touch the trauma. And I ended up back at square one with my health issues, like every 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. It didn't matter. I ended up back at square one. I would end up back at square one because I never addressed the hidden trauma in my nervous system. I was always had the gas on, right? Always, all the time. And I would even add fuel to that fire with like excess caffeine, sugar. You know, I loved stimulants back in the day, which is so weird considering I'm such a high energy person to begin with. I don't know how people would stand to be around me like that. Like I must have been like crawling off on the ceilings, you know, Heather, come down. Oh, you know, so digestive issues of something that has always plagued me. Like I said, I felt like I was basically born constipated. And so learning how to slow down, learning how to shift my nervous system out of that sympathetic fight or flight and into the parasympathetic rest and digest has been a godsend for my gut, for my mental health, for my body, for sleep, for everything. Like it's been really amazing. And so that's why I want to share some of these tools with you as we go along in this mini course. So back to the story. So fast forward, you know, I had a suicide attempt, Lyme disease, undiagnosed, mind you. Now I'm pregnant and still undiagnosed. And then I have a kiddo, and a couple years later, he gets diagnosed with celiac disease 2 weeks before his second birthday. Like his little belly had been so distended for so long, the muscles actually separated like a pregnant person's. You know, and of course the info I got was stay away from gluten, you'll be fine. There's so much more to it. And it's sad that stuff is labeled gluten-free that is not actually technically gluten-free. And that's a whole nother mini course. So if you know somebody who's not getting better on a gluten-free diet, holler at me. I've got some ideas on what's going on. So needless to say, this kid had a lot of issues right around age 9, back when I was going through this program. And I did a lot of the same testing on him that I did on myself and found out that his liver was just as congested at the age of 9 as mine was at the age of 34. And I had been a drinker and a partier and, you know, kind of trashed my body a bit. But we found, you know, through some of this functional lab work of kind of what was going on with him. And we started to turn things around, not completely, not yet anyway, but we started to. So now, fast forward 2013, and I finally got diagnosed with Lyme disease. It took another 8 or 9 years after that for me to get diagnosed celiac, endometriosis, and Hashimoto's. So I'm kind of like one of those typical Americans right now that are, you know, collecting autoimmune diseases like trading cards. Because I'm eating a standard American diet, because I'm a night owl, and so I stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm drinking a lot of water, but not good filtered water. I have genetic predispositions, mutations that doesn't allow me to detox properly. And I'm working, like I said, in a pretty toxic environment. I was living in a very toxic environment. So all these things kind of came together as like a perfect storm again. And I really, really, really had to dig deep this last year and peel back the layers. I had gained a bunch of weight again. I was in a lot of chronic daily pain again. My brain is really what was affecting me the most. It made me nervous. I was starting to forget a lot more. My cognitive capabilities were slipping. I would lose words a lot. And I was angry and I was reactive and I was moody, which is not who I am as a person. Like, to my core, I'm a loving, fun-loving, funny, outgoing person. But when you're in chronic pain every day, right? When you're exhausted, it makes even the smallest, littlest tasks seem monumental. And when somebody would ask something very small of me, I reacted like they were asking for my right arm. Because that's kind of how it felt, right? My energetic bubble was here, and there was no space, no bandwidth for me. And so I got me digging deeper into, okay, what's going on? Why am I back here again? Why am I angry again? Why am I reactive again? So I put my money where my mouth was at the beginning of last year, what was that, 2020? And did some lab work, looked for food sensitivities, looked at my hormones, looked at stool, looked at this new test that I do on everybody now, which is called a metabolic plus panel. So it's part of that biology piece that I was talking about. So with the metabolic plus panel, if you've got a history of anxiety and depression, like, I run this panel on everybody because it's looking for pyrrole disorder, which is like cutting edge type stuff in the mental health issues. Pyrrole disorder, copper excess, and undermethylation. And almost everybody that I've been testing, in all three, they use one of them, if not two, come back positive. And the awesome thing about that test is that it's what we call kind of low hanging fruit, right? That so like pyrrole disorder, for example, if it comes back that you're positive with pyrrole disorder, you're deficient in zinc, B6, and P5P, right? So you supplement with that, and it's a supplementation for the rest of your life because it's actually kind of a genetic mutation type stuff going on. You've got a deficiency somewhere down the line that doesn't like get corrected. You can only really kind of help supplement it. But the awesome thing is that within like a week or two, people are feeling so much better and their brain's coming back online. So that's kind of where I started to dig in this last year with the testing. I like to tell even folks who are like going to therapy, right? It doesn't matter how much talk therapy you do, or even physical therapy you do, or some of these other modalities. If you're going to continue to eat food that's inflaming your gut, it's going to inflame your brain. Leaky gut, leaky brain. Whatever is getting leaked out of the brain or in the gut is actually the same mechanism is happening in the brain. So if you're going to eat inflammatory foods, and if you have food sensitivities, and that's going to cause some issues with the blood-brain barrier, as well as with your gut, that's going to cause issues. If you aren't getting the right kind of sleep and the right amount of sleep, that's going to cause inflammation in the brain and cause all kinds of issues. If you're not drinking the right type of water, if you're toxic, right? If your body can't detox properly, like mine, I have some genetic mutations in my detox pathways, right? There's a lot of things that you kind of got to look at once you start dealing with chronic health issues. It's typically not just a one and done type of thing. And that's why I work with people with packages, right? Is that way I can kind of get an overall picture of what's going on with somebody. And then we coach up for the next couple of months, because your best thinking actions got you here. So now we got to do a 180 and go the other direction in order to get your health back on track, right? So I got to kind of tear apart some stuff and this can stay and this has to go and teach you some new tricks. But it's basically like a how-to guide of really how to take care of yourself long term. It's sad what's happening these days. We've got the younger generation of kids. It's the first generation ever that the life expectancy is going down. So their life expectancy is shorter now than their parents, which has never happened in the history of people, human beings. We've always had advancements and our life expectancy went up and up and up and up and up. And now because of excess toxins, because of eating food that's not food, because of toxins in our water and our air, because of artificial light and staying up too late, because of EMFs, there's so many things. And it's now coming to a head. It's now caught up to us, right? So enough with a backstory. Let's get into some meat and potatoes. So the somatic experiencing work, I'm just going to show you over the next couple mini courses, just a couple exercises that you can do at home. And I highly, highly recommend, like any muscle, right? It takes some working out, repetition to do them on a regular basis when you're not in chaos, when you're not in, what's the word I'm looking for? Like survival mode, right? Because then that way, when something does happen, you have these tools that are readily available and that you're used to using, right? You can't just throw out a new tool when you're in the middle of a breakdown and expect it to work. You've got to build these muscles up when chaos is not going on, right? So I like doing these at least 3 times a day, typically before I sit down and eat. Why? Because what did I say happens when you're in your parasympathetic? Rest and digest, right? So anything that you can help your digestion along is going to be a win-win-win. So the first exercise that I want to show you is called orientation. And I know all these are so simple. You're going to be like, really, Heather? What? But you just got to trust me. You just got to trust me. So the whole name of the game is to get the nervous system chilled out. And a lot of times the reason our nervous system isn't chilled out is because there's a tiger in the room, or at least our nervous system thinks there's a tiger in the room. So if you can do this orientation, which is simply looking around the room, because that's the other thing. Humans weren't made to sit and stare at a screen for a long time. So that actually sparks our nervous system into saying, hey, there's a huge problem here, when there's really no problem. It's just that we're not made to sit there and stare at a screen like that. So look behind you, look above you, look under you, right? And I will usually do it until I get that deep spontaneous breath or a yawn, right? Because it's kind of a signal to me that my system has switched from sympathetic into parasympathetic. Like I can even feel it and hear it in my voice as I talk. Like it just got calmed down a few notches. Right. The other one that I wanted to show you today is my favorite, because remember how I said earlier today that my energetic bubble has a tendency to be right here? Well, this is called a push away, and it helps get that energetic bubble just out where it needs to be a little bit better, right? So you're going to start off with your hands up here by your shoulders, and you're going to really engage your arms like you're pushing a boulder away. Like I don't want you to do it all week. Like we're going to push, and you're going to do it slow and intentional. Ready? So deep breath in. And we're just pushing, 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 pushing. And the cool thing is you can also like do it to the top. And you can do it below you. You can do it out to the side. Really make that energetic bubble bigger. Energetic bubble bigger. That's nice. So just some little tricks right now, little tips, I should say, with this somatic experiencing work to help get you out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. And the next couple modules coming up, we're going to dive into the FDN way of life, which is the Dress for Success protocol mini version. And I'm going to show you some more somatic experiencing exercises. Stay tuned.